All right, if you are a business marketing today, how do you specifically want to use this information that you've given us now to market your products, your services, or what's your visuals, how do you word your message to them? What should we be aware of?
Well, you can apply this to the smallest business or to the largest business. I would advise a client, the very first thing you do is support one of their athletic teams when they're young. And I don't mean when they're older, but you get your name out there when they are just entering into team sports. This generation was team graded, participated in all kinds of team activities, and given trophies just for showing up at team sports. You get your t-shirts on them for your company, even if your product doesn't fit them at that young age. But you want them to know that you care about them and that you understand that the women are really interested in fast pitch, slow pitch, whatever they're interested in. You start sponsoring their teams. And so that is a big deal.
You know, the criticism, this practice of giving trophies to young people in junior programs just for showing up has gotten a lot of criticism.
Well,
what's your take on that?
Oh, I think it's like everything else, Fran. It's got a plus and a minus. The plus of it is this is the first generation in three that thinks of the good of the team over the needs of the individual. They think in groups. If you notice, they travel in groups. They're always talking to each other. They are group oriented. Is it good for the group? The bad part of it is that the bad part of being rewarded for participation is that it's not the real world. So when you get out in the real world, they have to be trained from day one in that bosses have to, or whatever you want from them, you have to reward them all the way, all the time, and say, good job, or we compliment them on achievements rather than participation. Really important how you give a compliment to each generation. For the younger ones, you don't say you are special. What you say is, you know, your hard work really paid off. Compliment, let them know. Begin to give them an education in what's important to your business. It really made a difference in our work that you stayed and did your job. It really made a difference in our work that you did so-and-so. But let them know what an achievement is and how important it is to the business. So good side, bad side.
You know, women have always struggled to live the American dream in business. It's been in my generation. It's been a man-centric business. There's not an outward prejudice against women, but women had to fight harder to get their place. Silicon Valley and what's happened out there in the technology world. We read even in this day and time that the Silicon Valley is more male-driven, male-oriented. Is this millennial generation going to help us turn the corner on that?
They're already there. A young woman named Kim Swift invented Portal, which is a game that's sold in the millions. And it's been honored by the Smithsonian Institute. There is no gender identity on creativity in the digital world. So you have women that don't even have to break the glass ceiling. They've already broken it by the strength of their ideas. One of the interesting things is that women are being drawn to science, math, and technology, formerly the purview of men. And the deal of that is they're being drawn to it for three reasons. One, the government is encouraging young people to study math, science, technology. Why? Because we have to keep our competitive edge, because the rest of the world is really trying to take it away from us. The second thing is that television got wind of this. So television now has female role models like NCIS, has Abby, who is a genius when it comes to science. So the television programs now have role models who are women, who are interested in math, science, technology. And so you really have a lot of encouragement coming to these young women that this is your thing to do. And the last thing that encourages them is capitalism, because the new rock stars are techies. And consequently, it doesn't matter if it's Kim Swift or Mark Zuckerberg. They just want the product out there.
Yeah, they want to. This is Ann Fishman. She's the author of the just published book, Marketing to the Millennial Woman. Why did you write this book? It's obvious you wanted to expose the millennial woman, but also to teach us how to communicate, to market, and so forth. If our audience here, hopefully they go buy your book, tell them what they're going to get out of your book.
Well, what they're going to get out of it is they're going to understand almost 40 million women. Now, I told you that there were 80 million millennials.
Yes, you did.
40 million women almost.
Okay.
That's more than there are Canadians, more than there are North Koreans. That is a huge market. They are in your family. They are working at your side. They are all around you. And consequently, one of the things that is really key in my business is if generations, all 6 of them today, can understand the differences and respect the differences and work with the challenges or the weaknesses, boy, we pull together really well. I don't care if you're a business. I don't care if it's your family. I don't care if it's the U.S. Army. If you understand generational differences, you can just go right in and get that group organized, and it's a fine force.
So in your book, you talk about the generations, the 6.
No, I only talked about this one, and the reason I picked this one, I actually could have written a book on all 6 or any one of them. The reason I picked the women is that in some generations, there are more changes with the men. In some generations, there are more changes with the women. What I found really interesting is that in this generation, I kept reading articles that said no one understands millennials. And I thought, well, they just don't know enough about them because they really are quite understandable. But on the whole, we either haven't heard of them or we find them baffling or we find them different. So I wrote the book on the women because I thought that the women had changed the most. But it is critical to understand 6 generations of Americans so that we can begin pulling together again.
Can you, again, describe the other 5?
Okay, and this one I do have to use notes because this is where I really am great with everything except these numbers here.
Yeah.
All right, so you have the wonderful GI generation that got us out of the Great Depression, got us through the Dust Bowl, went on to win World War II. They would be 91 and older today.
Okay.
Then you have a generation called the silent generation. The silent generation, their ages today are 73 to 90. They have never produced a president. They're wedged between the GI generation and boomers. They're a generation of helpers. If Joe Biden were to enter and win, he would be the very first silent generation member to become a president. They have never produced a president, but they have produced every great civil rights leader and almost every feminist leader. Their job in history was to humanize our accomplishments. So that's what they've done. The next generation is the one everyone's heard of, which is baby boomers.
Yep.
Baby boomers were born from 1943 to 1960. That makes their ages today 55 to 72. The first generation in American history to put the needs of the individual over the good of the group. And therefore, that has caused a bit of chaos. Because when you start putting your needs, if I'm a Democrat, Republican, feminist, whatever it is,
yeah.
If I only see the world through that particular lens, it's not good for the group. It may be good for your little lens, but it's one of the reasons why we are such a divided country right now. So then you have Generation X, one of my favorite generations, born from 1961 to 1981. That makes their ages today 34 to 54. They're a generation of survivors. These kids survived latchkey lives, broken families, very little support during their formative years. And so that either makes you or breaks you. And it made them. These were the brave young men who brought down that plane during 9/11. They are capable of making the tough decisions that America is going to have to make. So this is one of my favorite generations. The next generation we just talked about would be millennials. They were born, as I said, from 1982 to 2000. That makes their ages today 15 to 33. And then we have one younger generation. I call them Generation 9/11. People haven't really identified them yet, but these are the children born after 9/11. Their lives are so totally different from anything you experienced, I experienced, millennials experienced. They will never know what it's like to go through an airport without seeing a security check. They have trackers on their phones. They have their footprints taken at birth. They are You know, the all that's being done about football and the football helmets. I'm not saying any of this protection is wrong, but what I'm saying is when a generation is protected to this extent, they won't take risk. And consequently, as adults, they will be a generation of conformists. Not a bad thing, because every once in a while, America needs a breathing spell. So that's kind of a quick wrap up of 6 generations. And you can actually find them on my website, which is annfishman.com, if you want to know more about your generation or about another generation.